Sajan, thank you so much for joining us today. As we begin, can you say a couple words, a few words about your current role and what's in your purview?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, Misha. My name is Sajan Gautam. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Arvest Bank. I'm
Mm-hmm.
also responsible for business continuity over here.
Mm-hmm.
I have been in this role for a little more than 5 years.
I
Um,
understand. I understand. So, and kind of in your role, everything cybersecurity rolls up to you, I would imagine.
yes, it does. It does.
And so that kind of paints the picture of where you are, the kind of the dot on the trajectory, on the line of your career trajectory. But can you say a few words about how did you get in cybersecurity? What was the starting point for you?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the line and the trajectory. It was not a straight line. It was a curvy line, bit zigzag, right? So, as a lot of the people in the CISO role these days, I started my career in different areas. So I did in networking, I did systems administration, I did identity and access management, data protection, and then I gradually moved into risk management area. So technology area, risk management area, then after risk management, business resiliency area. Then I also went to my graduate school, did my
Mm-hmm.
MBA with a focus on finance
Mm-hmm.
because finance and technology is a good combination for a CISO
Mm-hmm.
role. And then even forward, I went to CISO executive education with Carnegie Mellon
Mm-hmm.
University. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the path I took. I took the path of working as well as the education and invested quite a bit of my time in learning the new things. That's how I
Mm-hmm.
move
I
along.
understand. I understand. And I saw it in your on your LinkedIn page. It was CD Group before that and Goldman Sachs. So your focus is kind of financial services, which is interesting because it's again financial services, healthcare, both are heavily regulated. So the work for a CISO that's much more interesting, challenging versus some of the other industries. So it's certainly kind of adds this layer of regulatory oversight adds to the complexity and adds to the challenges.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly correct, right? Because financial industry has a lot of challenges from the regulations, all those things. So that is one side. But at the
Mhm.
same time, financial industries are usually ahead of the curve in the cybersecurity
Mhm.
than a lot of the other industries too. So this is I would not say the bleeding edge, but it's the leading edge that we are
Mhm.
on.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So it's basically what financial services do today, the rest of the world will do, I don't know, 6 months from now, probably, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, 6 months, that's a very
Generous.
aggressive
Yeah, generous.
estimate. Yes.
A couple of years. I understand. Um, it's it, your experience gives you a very unique vantage point, uh, given your different roles along the way, given your education. What kind of advice can you give for some of the junior professionals, either looking to make a transition from technology to cybersecurity, or maybe kind of outside of the field, who are really early in their journey? Maybe they're junior professionals, maybe even further upstream, maybe they're still kind of in college looking in the space, being curious about it, being interested in it. What would be what are the 2, 3 things in your view they should really double down on and focus their time to set them up for
Yeah.
success in their career?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very good question, right? This is how I do think of it. There is not a single path to a career in information security.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you want to be a CISO, there's usually multiple paths.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, However, there are few things that will help. First is be hands-on with technology.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean be hands-on with every technology, but at least find one or two core areas of your strength in the technology. So that is one point. Second is have a foundational knowledge about risk management. Because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, we are not simply solving the technology problem, we are helping organization manage their risk properly. So having this foundational knowledge and risk management tremendously helps. And then above all, stay curious. There are so many things happening. So curiosity is the key. Research minded is the key. So those are the three things that comes to my mind.
Certainly. It's well, I think one thing that attracts people to cybersecurity is it's ever changing, ever evolving. It's kind of like this constant battle. Like the bad guys adopt a new technology, and then there's a response from the cybersecurity community. So it's always this never-ending game of cat and mouse, and it feels like every year Gartner just adding new quadrants, new areas, new acronyms. So as a space, it's certainly moving fast and changing. It's no longer. It still makes me laugh when I go to RSA, I go to Black Hat, I see some of the visuals that cybersecurity companies use. You know, the teenage hacker in the hoodie, hunched over computer. It makes me laugh because the cybersecurity threats are no longer that. It's really well-resourced, well-funded organizations with distribution of duties, with HR departments and healthcare plans and vacation policies that are really government sponsored. So it's really it's not kind of a lone hacker against a large enterprise. It's a large enterprise against another large enterprise, which is kind of scary. But obviously, you, as you mentioned, being on the cutting edge, given your position in financial services industry, in your view, what are the top three most pressing challenges facing CISOs in general, and CISOs in financial services space in particular right now?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many, but I cannot emphasize enough about, especially in this day and age, how to secure and use generative AI in a pragmatic way, right? Not just secure way, but the pragmatic way. That means, yes, we have to use generative AI. If information security is not going to use the generative AI, business will, right? At the end of the day, we are here to support the business. So how do we utilize that in the pragmatic way? I do not think we have solved that challenges yet, because there are challenges of the safety, there are challenges of the appropriate regulations, all those things. So that would be the challenge for the next another 12 months at least. That's what I do think. Another is, instead of just saying the Department of No, how can we be a business enabler? How can information security add to the bottom line? It may not be the value generation or the revenue generation, but the value preservation too, right? Because how do we preserve the value? So how do we enable the business to move fast, save money? So that would be the second thing that I do not think we have cracked it yet, but we need to. And then again, we already, you just mentioned, threat landscape is constantly changing. How do we stay ahead of it? Because we are now not talking about these script kiddies, or we are not talking about these lone hackers who use the computer from a computer lab and try to penetrate a well-funded organization. We are talking about well-funded hackers backed by nation state, backed by criminal organization, targeting another organization. So those risks or those threats are still there. So I think those will be the challenges for at least another 12 months.
Interesting. I want to double click on one thing that you said about the Department of No. I think I heard this term more than once in the past, and it seems that to play a role of a business enabler rather than a business blocker, it would take a CISO to be involved in business discussions and business decision making upstream of those decisions, meaning to have a sit at the table with the board or the president to be, so that the cybersecurity is baked in those businesses, or cybersecurity thinking awareness is baked into the decision-making process, rather than, as we see sometimes in companies, it's, well, we're launching this product on Monday, do your cybersecurity thing over the weekend. So like treating cybersecurity as like a thin layer of paint that can just spread over, and hopefully it will stay together, which I think is just, on the one hand, it would take some initiative and education on the part of the cybersecurity community, but also on the other side, which is on CISOs to convey this message that they need to be, it's just a business need for them to be at that table when those decisions are made, as the decisions are baked in, because after they're done, often it's kind of too late to, it's not something you can apply. But also there needs to be a great awareness from the other end, from the boards and the CEOs. How do you think about whether the industry is going, and what do you think CISOs can do better or differently to create this alignment and create this integration of cybersecurity thinking and the mindset and making business decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very good question. And to summarize it, this is how I do think. Business and the technology, or the CISO organization in general, usually they do speak two different languages. But the common language is the finance, right? Finance is the business language. A lot of the executives, they may not understand the technology details, but when you explain them in the financial terms, they do understand it, right? Because they are there because of the financial knowledge, most of them. So how can information security and executives, other executives, find the correct, like right language, or the common language is the finance? So CISO can find a way, find an opportunity to talk about information security issues in a financial sense. So that means, so what? Let's talk about the loss if these things does not happen. So thinking in terms of the risk quantification, loss exposure, return on investment. So those are the common language that both of us can use. Then as we establish those common language, then CISO established the credibility to teach the other executives the technology language, right? Because if you try to go and teach other executives technology language without understanding their core language, it's very hard, right? It will be.
They'll say, yeah, so what? How does it impact my life? But if you use finance as the common denominator, it's dollars and cents. That's the language. Everyone works off a budget, right? So whether it's marketing or operations or cybersecurity, they all deal with the blood of an organization, which is cash, right? So and bringing it to that, it's actually would make a lot of sense. I wonder, since I think it's a very interesting conversation, a very interesting topic, I wonder, you mentioned quantifying risk. It's kind of based on assumptions, right? So it's a range of assumptions, and you assign probabilities, you assign value, and the model is only as good as the kind of math behind it, as the assumptions behind it. And often we are kind of predicting and guessing at things, and seeing the company's name in the newspaper. And I hate to bring up MGM and Caesars, but I'm sure the boards and the C-level executives, those organizations are not super excited about seeing their names in the news in that particular light. And a lot of that is not very easy to quantify. Is there a framework that you recommend cybersecurity professionals use, kind of broadly? What kind of framework you think would be proper to use in quantifying some of the more intangible aspects of risk?
Yes, I mean, there are multiple. And also, I do have this assumptions, like the question about the assumption that you mentioned, the statement about
Mhm.
assumptions. We do make assumptions even in non-quantitative uh, assessment, right?
Mhm.
Because making an assumptions on the thing, that's a business practice. You do see that happening in the other, like let's say you are doing the financial forecasting, you are doing some kind of assumptions,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
You are not doing the financial forecasting without assumption. So having an assumption in itself is not a bad thing. So let's think about that one as well, right? But there are several methods. There are fair method, that is one like commonly used. But overall, if we think about any kind of probabilistic method with Bayesian, like, hey, what is the loss expectancy
Mhm.
on certain events and then calibrate it over time, I think
Mm.
that would give us much better picture than just giving us this qualitative low, medium, high. What does low mean? If there's no context or no dollars uh, assigned to that, what does red, yellow, green means? I don't think that does make any sense. So quantitative is the only way to go, right? I mean, let's think about not just the information security. Think about the insurance companies. We have been doing the quantification of the insurance for a long time, and right, there's like loss on a different type of operational thing. We have been doing that for a long time. I think we are making cybersecurity quantification overly complex
Mm.
in talks. In practical, it is not as hard.
Interesting.
Because, yeah.
Interesting. It's interesting you mentioned that, but kind of using historic data to feed into your model to make the model more predictive, more accurate over time makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because I mean, if you insurance probably is a good place to start because they deal with risk as part of their business. Uh, Maybe not exactly apples to apples because if you're insuring a house in Florida, you can take a look. You can look at weather patterns over time and make an assumption how likely this house is to get flooded or destroyed in a hurricane. But cybersecurity, probably there is not as much historic data that exists. And to your point, the nature of threats, the attack vectors, the perimeter, there are so many moving parts that all of them change at all times, and how they interact with each other, and how important one part versus the others. I mean, COVID, everyone is working from home, your perimeter is gone, right? So everyone is in different environments that they've children in the household, God knows what they're clicking on. So all those issues come into play that no one probably could foresee. So it's definitely it's not without challenges, obviously, making accurate decisions. But to your point, if we start with dollars and cents and not high, medium, low, I think it's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And also, the thing is, we do have enough data to get it started. The
Mhm.
purpose is not to come up with the perfect solution. We will never be coming up with the perfect solution. It is about getting better. Can we make better decisions with the data we have?
Mhm.
Yes, we can,
Mhm.
right? It is, we would make much better decisions with the data
Mhm.
than with just a high, medium, low, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, it makes a lot of sense. Sajan, I switching gears a little bit. We talked a lot with our members, with CISOs, but also talked with some of the technology partners, and this topic of cybersecurity vendors comes along, and often CISOs have a very visceral reaction. On the one hand, obviously, you need cybersecurity vendors. On the other, some of them are very, how should I put it, uh, aggressive, maybe not the right term, but they're kind of very active in reaching out over email and LinkedIn and phone and whatnot. I'm sure you get a kind of fair share of that. Looking back, without naming names, protecting the innocent, what will be some of the examples in your recent experience where, again, without kind of naming the company names, vendors that surprised you in the way they invest in building a long-term relationship, providing value, And on the flip side, what are some of the pet peeves in your, I'm sure, in your dealing with vendors? I'm sure most people have some.
Yeah, absolutely. There are good and bads, right? I would say most of those are good. I do not have that bad experience, but sometimes they do try to provide the point solution without understanding the problem, right? And instead of selling us on the use cases, what I want to solve the problems, uh, vendors try to sell us features or a lot of these bells and whistles, right? So if I do have a three-speed blender, somebody wants to sell me 5-speed blender without understanding, like, hey, do I really need the 5-speed blender or 3-speed blender is enough? So not understanding the use cases is one of the things that gets annoying. But a lot many times this vendor community, they are helping us, right? Because there are new threats coming. We need to be very creative and coming up with the solutions. And point solution is okay too, because if there is a point problem, a point solution is needed. We cannot have this big tool there to solve the point solution. What we need to do better is how can we have 70 different tools addressing the same point problems, not competing against each other. I think that is true with any kind of new technology. It will take some time to mature and then assimilate. I think we are getting there. It is much better now than it was a couple years back.
Interesting.
So,
well, obviously, kind of dealing with 50, 60, 70 vendors, managing those relationships and looking at 50 different dashboards, I can imagine it gets challenging fairly quickly. But I think the industry, as it matures, is moving towards either more unified solutions that incorporate point solutions within kind of one corporate umbrella. And I think a lot of larger companies are fairly acquisitive, kind of moving in that direction. But also the point solutions, I think, are doing a better job interoperating with some of the legacy systems. So I think from the vendor community, it appears that there is this awareness of not taking pain away rather than adding more pain to having to deal with many different point solutions. I think at least on the positive side, it appears that's the way industry is going. Sajan, I know we're coming up on time. We talked about Athenia, and you mentioned you had a few ideas on what we can do differently or better. I'd love you to share some.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So something that I really like about Athenia, one is provides relevant news in a very concise way. I do not have to flip through like multiple pages to learn what's going on. I like it. On the what could be made better, nothing jumps off. But at the high level, when we go to the Athenia website, how can we integrate those newsletters we do get in a timely way in the website itself? That way I can go and say, like, hey, search for the newsletter that was sent out on a certain date. That would be helpful just for browsing purposes. But other than that, I don't think anything jumps off.
I understand. I appreciate it. So certainly something we'll look into. Again, Susan, I know we're coming up in time. So I guess some of the last questions. Imagine you have a crystal ball and you can see into the future and you can see what the world's going to look like a year from now, maybe 2 years from now. In the world, CISOs will be thinking about, anxious about, concerned about what 2-3 themes that maybe they exist now, but maybe they're only emerging, but will be more prevalent in the future. What do you think would those be?
Yeah, one primary thing that jumps off is CISO would be more involved than ever for business resiliency part. Because if you look for any organization, cyber risk is one of the top risks for a business. And whenever there is a cyber event, the business resiliency gets affected, right? Business continuity and all those things. So CISO would get more involved in overall organizational resiliency. So that's what I do see through my crystal ball, if I do have one.
Okay, I understand. Great. Sajan, this was lots of fun. Thank you so much for taking your time. Where can people find you? What's the best way to connect?
LinkedIn might be the best way. Sajan Gautam. I mean, like, if you just search my name, you would find me there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure.